So today we are going to work on contour drawing from nature. It should be a lot of fun, very relaxing, nourishing, and there'll probably be, 45 minutes to an hour for our class today. But as always, let's start with some just gentle stretches and movement, a little bit of meditation before we begin our drawing practice. Let's go ahead and get started. Just a few gentle movements. If you're sitting, I invite you to start standing today. So really grounding down, feet hip-width distance apart. Take a few rounds of cleansing breath, feeling your feet into the earth. Maybe drawing your eyes closed if that feels okay. Just doing a little sway side to side actually before we even begin our breath. And then front and back. A little gentle, easy bend in the knees. Find your center. And feel your feet planted firmly on the ground. And imagine as if there are roots connected to your feet, growing all the way from the center of the earth up into you. You can kind of make these movements, but yet you feel grounded and stable. Inhale, lift your arms overhead. You can open your eyes if that feels better. Look up. Exhale, slowly press your hands all the way down, using your breath. Inhale, arms go up. Exhale, slowly for a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hands coming all the way down. Inhale, arms lift, gaze, lips. Maybe a little back bend this time. Exhale, come to center. Lower your arms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, inhale, arms lift. Exhale slowly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can open your eyes. Take a little twist right, a little twist left. Maybe even coming up onto the ball of the opposite foot. Just loosening up your spine. And then come back to Tadasana. Same point of grounding. Feel your feet. Find your roots. Inhale deeply through the nose. Exhale, side out the mouth. Inhale through your nose. Exhale, side out. Again, inhale. Exhale, release. Let's just do a little bit of shaking now to get a little bit of energy moving in our bodies. So kind of start this little bouncing. I'll even angle my camera down so you can see. Step back. But feet are hip-width distance, really grounded. Just I'm going to start moving the body. Eyes can be open or closed. And then shake your right arm a little bit. You can start this little bit of breath work if you like. I'm making this sound. And your left arm. And both arms. And then maybe even kind of moving your head. I like to do a nice gentle neck roll. Really gentle, nothing too difficult. Just to release your neck, sides of your neck. Keep shaking. Feet are grounded the whole time. And we'll be here for about 10 more seconds. Just getting a little bit of movement in the body. A little bit of activation of the lymph system. And slow it down. Close your eyes. Tadasana. Feel your grounding. You feel a little tingling sensation in the body. And just breathe. Right. If your eyes are closed like mine, gently blink your eyes open. And let's go ahead and take a seat. And we'll be here for just a few minutes to do a little bit of meditating, just finding a little bit of our center. Sit with a long, tall spine. If you can, place your feet firmly on the ground, your ankles under your knees. Palms can just be face down on the thighs for a little bit of grounding. Or if you need some energy, flip them up, palms face up. And just begin to come into your breath. Noticing the effects from that little bit of movement we did, noticing how you feel in this moment. Just asking yourself what you need out of this next 45 minutes together. What is it that you want to release? Maybe some toxins in the body. What is it that you want to cultivate? Or bring in. Just do a little body scan, noticing any areas of tightness or dull energy, and allow your breath to fill these areas. So as you inhale, feel your breath come in through the nostrils, filling up the belly, the ribs, the chest. And as you exhale, allow the breath to soften, sending it to where you need it the most in your body. And it can be a physical sensation. Maybe you want to send it to your heart center. And just finding whatever you need today in this moment. Drawing into yourself. Allow your breath to slow and become natural. If you'd like to set an intention for this next hour that we're spending together, I invite you to do that. Maybe placing both hands on the heart, if that feels okay. I'm going to draw in some gratitude, so whatever you need. But I always find that finding a moment of gratitude resets my mindset, allows my mind to shift. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to come on here and even do this. Set your intention. Inhale deeply through your nose. Exhale, release. Gently release your hands if they're in your heart center. Blink your eyes open. And come back into the space. I'm going to move my camera back a little bit. Okay, so it's time to get our art supplies together. Today I've got a couple different size Pigma pens, or Micron pens, excuse me. I just grabbed a 0.01 and a point. If it's 01 or 0.1, 0.1 and 0.5. And then I have my objects from nature, so I'm able to get out into nature. I know with all the snow it might not have been possible. But you can always, of course, watch this on the replay and come back and do the activity with me. But I had grabbed, this is about a week old now, so it's not so fresh, but like a stick off of a tree on a walk, and it had some nice red berries on it, which they're a little shriveled now, but you can see that. And then just a couple leaves, so you don't have to go very far. You can just go out to your backyard and grab whatever you like. And we're going to just do some contour drawings today. So let me show you, these are some of the ones I did the other day, and they don't take very long. They're simple, but they feel nice. They feel nice to draw. They feel nice to look at afterwards. So that was the sticks, and then here's my leaves, which I didn't love the composition on this, but that's okay. I could always cut it or, use it later in an art journal. And we'll play a little bit with watercolors with the rest of our time. So it's 11:11, so that's my time to read my daily affirmation usually. All right, so I'm going to flip the camera so everyone can see what I'm doing. Hopefully you can see that. You can get any size paper. These are pretty small. This is maybe 2 inches by 6 inches. I've got here about 2 by 3, or a little bit larger if you want to draw larger. This one here is maybe 3 by 4. And all I'm going to do is we're going to start out with a really basic contour drawing. So place your object in front of you wherever it looks like you want it to be. All right, so you can start 2 ways. If you just want to go for it and do it with pen, you can just go for it and do it with pen, which I did on some of these. But sometimes that's a little scary. So if you want to grab a pencil and an eraser. But if you have multiple pieces of paper, it doesn't matter. So you can mess up and go back and do it with a pen. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to start drawing, and I'm just going to look at the outline. So a contour is literally just the outline. We're not worried about everything in the middle. So it's almost as if you took this and traced the outside of it. And it's going to be like a semi-blind contour. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I'm not so concerned about every little detail. But I'm just going to start drawing and trying to look at my paper the least amount of possible. So I'm going to try to look at the object. And I'm just going to start, and I'm going to draw the outline. So where it intersects something, or where it, like, I have these little nubs coming out, I'm just going to draw. And it doesn't really matter if it's off. I just want to practice seeing. And see, I'm getting a little close to the edge of my page, but that's okay. And it's not so much about proportion. It's about starting to draw and not feeling like, oh, I can't draw. And honestly, this is great if you like zoom in. So you don't want to, let your mind play tricks like, oh, I know how this is supposed to look, and I'm going to try and draw how it looks. But then it just doesn't really, it doesn't really work. And as I begin to come up here, I'm going to run off the page, but maybe I change my angle a little bit on purpose just so I can keep a little bit more on the page. So always thinking about composition. I'm going to move this so you guys can see the stick a little better. So I'm like up in here, so this doesn't really look like much of anything right now, but that's okay. I'm going to draw this little nub where there was probably a berry or flower. And then I might come around here and just round it off. All right, step 1. So simple, right? Then I'm going to come back to here and I'm going to do the other side. So again, starting with this little end of the stick. And notice I'm going pretty slow. So usually when we do our art parties, it's pretty, abstract. So today's a little bit more looking at objects, and it really doesn't matter that I'm kind of flubbing it up. It doesn't. We can always go back. But honestly, I don't know if I really need to. And this guy's going to run right off the page, and then I'm just going to come back down. And the slower I go, probably the better. I know when I talk, I tend to lose sight of everything, but you can really see the curvature or the little nubs sticking out. Or when I get up here, I have one stick kind of growing on top of the other. So I'm going to draw this across and fill that in. And then I'm going to come back into here in a moment. Actually, I might come back into there right now. I'm going to draw the other side of this piece. And you can see just really not so worried about being realistic. And then there's another stick coming out of here, so that's going to go in front. And then I'm just going to kind of curve this around. All right, it doesn't look like much right now, right? But that's okay. All right, so I'm kind of liking what's happening. The berries, again, I just kind of made them round as if they were live berries. So you can take some artistic licenses here and just experiment with what works for you. So you can see my proportions aren't really great. I mean, they're not terrible, but, you know, just kind of looking and seeing and trying to be like, all right, yeah, this could work. And I kind of modified here so I didn't run off too soon. And I'm thinking this feels a little bit empty, although it's kind of pretty, but, you know, you can rotate it around and be like, all right, maybe I want to do something over here. So maybe I'm going to take my stick, turn it, and then figure out, all right, where do I want this to go? So then you can play with it. Actually, I might even like hold it up and be like, oh, how does that look? And just figure out what looks the most interesting. And maybe I just have this like little guy come over in the corner. I kind of like that idea. All right. I'm just going to turn my stick. Maybe I use the same piece I did. I think I'm just going to draw this guy coming in from over here. Maybe about here. And it's like I said, it doesn't have to be in proportion to anything. Just going to come in off the edge. And I'm starting to draw my contours. I'm kind of looking at the angles, looking at the texture of the edge. And at the same time, I'm thinking about my composition just a little bit. You know, always going right up to the edge. I don't know if I like that. I might adjust that. I might run him off. All right, and then I'm just going to come around the other side. And come up this way. And there's this one. So I'm just adding a little more visual interest. And, you know, I can play with this. I can always cut my paper down after the fact. I'm okay with where that, I'm just going to let it run off. I think it's fine. And then maybe I add one more. Not sure. You'll draw part of the stick coming in. So looking for something that's interesting. With whatever object you're drawing, you can play around with it. Whether you find it, I don't know, just to see. So I'm going to draw this little guy coming in behind. As if he was behind the other one. And again, kind of just looking at the contour. Trying to look at the shapes that it's making and not saying this is a stick and this is how I think a stick is. Because that's what we tend to do. We tend to think we know what something looks like. And then it really messes with our drawing. In fact, maybe we'll do a project one day where this little stick comes from this side. We do like an upside down drawing where you don't know what it is. I still love to do those with my students because it really helps you understand to see shapes rather than the idea of what you think it is. All right, I'm kind of liking this. I'm going to leave this. I might end up trimming this end later, but you know, it's all an experiment. If it doesn't work, that's why we have extra paper. So if you drew and you're like, oh, I hate this, you can start over. All right, so this is what I'm doing for my next step. I might even rotate this. I'm setting my stick aside, and then I'm grabbing one of my pigment pens, and I'm going to start with the fatter one, but you can do skinnier. What do I want? Skinnier will make it more delicate. Maybe I'll do thinner, and I can always go back with my thicker pen and do that. So you can see it there. All right, let me rotate it back around so I can draw. I'm going to just start going over my contour. If there's anything that you don't like the shape of, you can just adjust it as you're drawing on top. And you can keep your stick there or your object there if you need it. And I'm just going to, so where I have it overlapped, I'm just going to go ahead and draw it down there. And this is just a really nice, fun, relaxing way to take some time to draw and do a bit of a fun art activity. Oops. And you can see where I disconnected my lines. It's good with contour drawings to try and make it a continuous line just for the experience of it, but sometimes when you're going back over top of your marks, it's a little bit easier to do it the other way. But with the camera here, it's a little difficult for me to do this because I have to kind of lean around everything. All right. And this is going to come up here. I really encourage you, even if you have, think that this is not for you, give it a try. Work on just seeing, slowing down. So I'm going a little fast. Noticing the grip of your pen. Really noticing your breath. Breathe. My yoga class this week is focusing all on the breath. Opening up the rib cage, making room for the breath. Just the same thing with our drawing. Making time. Making space to breathe. Alright, so my little outline here. And this guy comes in front. Oops. And if you mess up, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to play with paints in a little bit. Then if you want to go back like this berry, I'm going to go ahead and kind of just add this little, space between them. You can actually look at your stick. If you'd like to go back and give it a little bit of texture, or some of these berries have this little I don't know, I want to call it a husk. I don't know what you call that. But this little bit of matter that holds it on, you can kind of add that in. So you can add a little bit of detail if you like as you go back, but totally not necessary. So again, the point of this is to slow down, relax, find a little joy in drawing and experimenting. I think the hardest thing for people slowing down. And it can be a little bit easier once you're doing your yoga practice. Just finding that ability, to say, okay, today I'm just going to go draw something or paint something. And giving yourself that permission to do that is huge. And maybe you're not really an art person and you would much rather go for a run. Totally get it. Maybe finding an activity that balances you out. So whether it's cooking, something creative that you enjoy, think of it as time for self-care. Not just doing art with your kids, which is always great, but doing art for you. Okay, so I've got the whole thing outlined. I'm going to get rid of those pencil marks. Oops. And then we're going to do a little bit of painting. And if you don't have paint and you just have a pen, you can just keep drawing. There's no rule that you have to paint. If you have colored pencils, that might be a really nice way to fill the space. If you have markers, you can use those. Markers can get a little messy, so I kind of caution you with markers. Okay, so now, this is where it gets fun and we can experiment. So I'm going to grab a few size brushes and wet my paints. So if you have cake watercolors that are in the trays, you want to go ahead and just take some water, wet them, and just get them ready to use. I didn't wet them beforehand because they just dry out kind of quick. No point doing it 20 minutes or 30 minutes before I use them. And maybe just as you're doing this, think about what colors you want to use. And you might look at it and say, okay, well, the stick is brown, but it's so many more shades of brown. Like you can see, you know, shades of gray, shades of kind of this light tan. Obviously, the berry has red in it. So you can see all these highlights and shadows as well, which we're not really going to try and be realistic today. We're going to be a little more abstract. But think about how can you play with color? What colors do you want to use today? Maybe you're like, I don't even want it to be brown. I want to make a blue stick. Go for it. All right, then I've got some different brushes. So I've got here a number 2 and a number 4 brush. If you're not sure what you have, they usually have numbers on them right here. But the smaller the number, the smaller the brush. Pretty sensical there. So I'm going to start with the number 2. And I'm actually going to start by wetting the area. Didn't do a very good job. I don't know if I even erased this. So I'm going to erase my pencil lines. Thought I did a better job than that. See a few there hanging out. It's great with these pigment pens. They dry quick. They can erase right over them. Voila. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to my number 2 brush. And I'm going to start by just adding water to where I want the paint to go. So there's not any color on here. And I'm not going to add it to the berries yet. So I kind of like to play with watercolors this way. It gives it a nice, like fun quality of dispersing naturally. All right, so if you're doing brown, I'm gonna get, I had some mixed brown and black from earlier, so not super exciting, but you know, do whatever you want here. And playing with the amount of water on your brush or in the paint, so I'm using the lid over here to just kind of mix my colors. And you can kind of, I love to use the paper towels, but you know, I can rinse my brush, kind of dry it off, and then dip it in the paint that's already diluted. And then you just kind of put your brush down to it. You can see it just starts to disperse. If you do it and you really hate the color, just grab a paper towel and gently dab it up. Most of that color will come up. But you gotta do it relatively quickly. Okay, so not a lot of color in here. Totally fine. I might just take, you know, I can play around. Maybe I'll take more of the true brown, add some of that in. Yeah, it's not doing much for me. And this is going to dry lighter, so just keep that in mind. Maybe I take blue. Craziness. I like to put blue in with my browns. It's more of a, like an opposite color. It gives it, I don't know, a nice quality. It's kind of playful, experimental. It makes it a little more gray. And then if you really hate it, yeah, doesn't matter. We can do another one. It's kind of playing around here. All right, so not much to that one. I'm going to let that dry for a little bit before I go back and do my berry. And then I'm going to come over here and do another twig. And maybe this one I'm going to experiment with just putting the paint straight down. See if it looks any different. It should have more intensity to it, more color to it. If you go out of the lines, it doesn't really matter. And if you're doing a leaf, it's a great way to play with some of the colors and mixing colors on the page. Just decided to do the twig today. It's a little more simple, I think. People might feel like it's a little more accessible, but it just depends on what, you know, what you're feeling. And you might have something completely different. You might have a nut or something from a shrub outside. All right, and I'm going to experiment with a little bit more water here. So I really wet my brush down, thinned out this paint. I'm just applying color. And maybe you don't want to apply color all the way through. Maybe you want to like give it a highlight. You could leave the one side white, give it a little bit of difference in contrast. But it's all about playing and experimenting and really not caring if you mess this up, because what is this, 2 by 5, 2 by 6? If I mess it up, it won't take me very long to do a new one. And sometimes you get really cool elements out of it, and you can like cut them up and put them in your art journal later. So you can really just kind of let yourself go. You can see over here, like that blue is sort of all but disappeared. So interesting. All right, I'm going to add a little bit of blue on this guy too. I like how it almost gives it like a texture without giving it a texture. And then we can go back and like work back into these too. So there's really not any rhyme or reason. I'm not trying to be realistic. I'm not trying to give it shadows so much. Although I kind of like it on the bottom, almost as if it's a shadow, but it makes it fun. And if I feel like it's too blue, I'm just going to like rinse out my brush a little bit and disperse the paint a little bit. I'm going to come back over here. And I hope, as people tune in and are watching, if they like these art classes, spread the word. Look, my stick got really blue. Okay, a little crazy. These are free. I'm trying to do them every week and find a time that works for people. I know it's a little bit tricky with the holidays, so today might not be the day that people want to join live, but that's why I leave it up to. Oops, I got a little bit of water outside. No big deal. Voila. I can also come back in with my brown and be like, okay, I went a little crazy here. Let's add a little bit more brown. This is also a fun way to experiment with color mixing. If you remember your color wheel, opposites on the color wheel make brown or gray. So orange and blue are opposites, so hence the brown. And blue to it, it gets a little more gray. Whatever you're doing and working on, you can decide what you want to play with. If you really hate it, just set it aside. Do another little contour drawing. I think I did my first one in like 15 minutes. It's not a huge time investment. It's looking a little sad. It's very wintry, gray. We're going to give it some bright pops of color. So I'm going to pretend the berries are not dead now, shriveled up red. But maybe you want to. Maybe you like that texture and you want it to look like that. When it was on the tree, it had this beautiful bright red berry on it. And I was like, oh, I love that. You kind of forget sometimes in winter that things can still have growth. We think of everything as being dormant or dead, but there's actually still things in our environments that will grow and flourish. I think that's pretty cool, actually. Who would think under all this snow that we got in the last couple of days, there might be some, life. And then I look at the squirrels and all the animals, and the sun is out right now. It's just so pretty. A whole new appreciation for winter. This is coming from somebody that's the grumpiest in the winter. It's not my season at all. Especially towards the end of winter. I practice Ayurveda, and in Ayurveda there are 3 doshas. Doshas are sort of mind-body types, but they all have qualities associated with them, which are associated with times of year and times of day. And I personally am a Vata Kapha, which means Vata is a light, dry, airy, brittle. So we are in Vata season now, but we're getting ready to transition into kapha season, which is cold and damp. So those two things combined in my constitution, I get a little more affected by things. If you're a pitta, you love this time of year because you are affected more by the heat. So you like this cold weather, and this is perfect because it's sort of that balance between vata and kapha season where it's dry, but it's moving into this colder season, or damper season, excuse me. But you love the cold. And you also probably tend to have a lot of fire in your belly. So it's a whole so involved science behind it, which is why I love it. And I'm learning every day. Yeah, just to learn about your constitution, what can help you. So for every constitution, going for a walk in nature at any point in time is one of the best things we can do for ourselves. So even for cold, just bundle up, wear appropriate clothes, and get outside and just go for a little stroll. It's not just for the exercise, but, for your mental state. And if you can do it first thing in the morning, that's great. I know I've been super reluctant to do that with this weather. But now with the sun out, I feel like, oh yeah, I can totally do that. All right, you can see I'm going out of the line some spots. It doesn't matter at all. All right, so I kind of have this, blue, gray, brown, not a lot of color in there. It's kind of washed out, faded. I'm going to take a really bright red, and I'm just going to put it right in that berry and make it just so vibrant. And, doing my best to not get too much water on my brush. And like I said, it doesn't really matter if you go over the lines. What does matter, if you have a regular pen, you're not going to be able to watercolor over it. So you want to make sure you have a pigment pen of some kind. There's other brands. I have Micron, but Sakura makes some Pitt pens. I think there's one more that I always forget. The pigment won't bleed when it gets wet after it dries, so it's almost like an India ink. Alright, I love my little berries there. And I'm just going to step back and look at it and say, okay, am I happy with it? I feel like it's a little sad. So I'm going to take some warmer brown, a little more pigment, and I'm going to just work back in here a little bit. And as the watercolors themselves dry, you can kind of go back on top and get a nice, might give a nice effect, it might not. You can always re-wet with water first and then add a little bit more. This is so narrow, it's totally fine. Like, it'll give it a little more texture if the watercolor is dry. All right, it's getting a little monochromatic, so might be going a little too far. I'm going to do it just on the top. See if I can maybe just give it some highlights here and there, rather than, like, I started covering that up. I don't really like it. Alright. A little more water on my brush. There, I like that so much better. Take a little water and a little paint. And I am not like a watercolorist by any means, but I love using them. I like them because they make me loosen up. So anyone that knows my art, I get real controlling with everything. And it doesn't always work for me. It's a reflection on my life, right? Just let the paint go, surrender. And I think that's why I like watercolors. And you can get super realistic watercolor artists. I mean, they are out there, but I think I like the fact that the paint moves and changes and I can mess with it. And I like to do these little type of, tiny drawings because it doesn't really matter if this doesn't turn out great. But I've just spent, time finding some balance, doing something that's enjoyable, a little bit of self-care. It's pretty fun. and it's so stress relieving. I'm not doing it with the intent of creating a great work of art, which is, good God, the most stressful thing ever. All right, and I'm going to add a little pink to my berry. Oh, and it went outside the line. No worries. I just wanted to add a little bit of extra, like a magenta color. All right. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes you can do that on purpose, so like maybe I just round it out and make the whole thing go out of the line. Yep. Done. Of course, there's a lot of water on there now, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit of magenta to these just to see what it does. All right. Not the greatest work of art, but I kind of like it. And I'm going to let it dry because things always look different after they dry. And then maybe, you know, if you want to do another one, here's the first one. You can have like a little series, and they can even set together if you do like the same size papers. That's always really fun. If you had like 3 of the same size, a little triptych, and space them out, and you can end up making a larger work of art out of all your small experimentations. So let's see, it's 11:43. I'm going to set this aside. We can do maybe like one quick leaf before we wrap up, and I'm not going to finish this, but that's okay. So here's my original leaf. You can see where I've played with the colors. It's pretty fun. Here's my found object. And so here's a little piece of paper, and I think I'm just gonna, I'm gonna be daring and do it in pen? Why not? All right, so I'm starting with my contour drawing, and I'm just gonna kind of go the outside first, and then I'll come back and work in. And I might not even give a lot of those veins and texture. I'm just gonna see what happens. So I'm gonna start at the point, and you can see kind of the texture, but it doesn't matter if it's like perfect by any means. Contour drawing is just looking, following the edge. Okay, didn't do a whole lot there, right? Let's see what happens this way. And if this doesn't, like even if I draw with pen and I'm like, I don't like it, this is a great scrap piece of paper then to play with color too. But I like to kind of make myself finish it out instead of scrapping it, unless I make a huge mistake. Oops, I picked up my pen. All right. So I'm just going to bring this up. And again, it's not so important about proportions. And I'm just going to let it run right off. And then I'm going to come back over here. It's always tricky. I never know. Is it better to go up this way and down or this way and over? So it's all a work in progress. This is nice where the leaf curls up. And notice your breath. Nice slow marks. Trying to look less at my drawing and more, or less at my page, more at my object. And I'm going to draw the central vein. And just kind of be gentle, and it disappears here and then comes out on the other side. And comes up towards the middle. Alright, so there's my first leaf. I'm going to put my 0.5 pen aside. And then I've got my 0.01, and maybe I'll add some of the veins. Of course, I just moved my leaf, so let's rotate that back around. I don't know. I'm thinking I'm just going to put like a few hints of veins. Maybe where I feel like I want to have them show, like where it curls. I'm kind of looking at what my bumps are here, but I know that this isn't really to scale, so it may not look super realistic, which I'm actually happy about. Let's add one more for fun there. So then the question is, do I put the veins through here? Oh, and I missed this little piece where the leaf folds around, so I'm going to grab my thicker pen and just kind of draw this jagged edge. This gives it a little bit of interest. And then why not put a few veins in? Sometimes I get caught up on the veins. All right, so let's keep going for just a few minutes. And then we'll wrap it up. In fact, kind of finding this rhythm, using your breath. The leaves are nice because it gives you this sort of repetition. A really great way to just relax into it. And then down here, it's going to kind of trail off. I'm really not paying attention to the reality of it at all. Oops, and I went over the line. No biggie. All right. All right, there's my drawn leaf. Let's paint. All right, I'm going to grab a much bigger brush because I have a much bigger area. So I've got a number 8. And I'm literally just going to come over here and see how we just finished with the pigment pens. It's dry already. And I am using like a student grade watercolor paper. I'm just going to apply some water. We're going to finish this in like 3 minutes. If you get too much water, just dab some of it up with a paper towel. You want to try and keep it inside where you want the paint to go. So anything that's outside your lines, which maybe is what you want, well, it'll run there, so you can, be a little creative with that. And then I'm going to use like this yellow ochre color and orange. Actually, yes, and then brown and blue. Let's see where I go with this. All right, so I'm going to take a little bit of brown and just sort of like, I don't know, just start moving it around. And I kind of want this lighter, so I'm going to maybe not apply that over there yet. But you can see as I move the paint, like it's more over here. So, this is where the fun comes in. I'm just kind of looking at my leaf, but I'm also like, okay, a lot of different colors and spots and textures happening. And then I'm going to grab that yellow ochre and just put some of that in here. It's pretty yellow, so maybe you don't want that much yellow, so I'm just going to do that. And then take some orange and put that around here. And then I like to just play with like moving paint. Sometimes it becomes a big jumbled mess. Totally doesn't matter. All right, so I have no color on my brush. I'm just going to start moving this around. And just keep in mind that colors, you can blend them right on your page like this. Oops, and I missed that little guy too. So I will do the parts that curl up maybe after. It's still probably going to bleed into each other because unless I let it totally dry and then go back, but I've got some nice colors happening here. And maybe I'll go back with a little bit of brown just to give it a little more depth. And if you do choose to use black, which it tends to take over, so just be really cautious. I usually mix things with black off the page. Sometimes I'm being lazy and I throw it in there and I'm like, it took over. So I like playing with the opposite colors first. So in this case, I'll use the blue again because it's opposite orange. And then these lighter areas, I'm going to do really pale, pale, pale brown. Like just not as much color here, just because it's the back side of the leaf. So not so much intensity in color. But you can still add a little bit. So you just a dab of orange, kind of work it in here. Alright, so now I want to just add, I'm going to play with some blues. You might even want to play with purple because there's yellow in here. Opposite of yellow is purple. And I'm just going to start pretending there's like a little shadow here, even though it's not really going to look like a shadow. I'm just going to work it in. And just kind of play with it. And there's like a little crease here. You can see how quickly we're doing this drawing. It's a great way to just So, alright, I'm going to take 10 minutes and go play with some paint color. I love to do that actually. A little more brown. And this isn't maybe the most exciting composition. Like if I was taking the whole hour to do this, I'd probably add some more leaves. Same with this one here. Like I would overlap and play with the position and just see if it looks interesting. But sometimes it's nice to do things simple first and then worry about the next step later. So starting with step one, playing with line and color. Maybe even on this edge, I'll add a little bit more in. Alright, and like, maybe I want to call that done. It's kind of fun to play. It might not look like the most wintry of leaves, but it kind of looks pretty cool. Maybe even a dab of purple, dare I do it? Sometimes purple takes over too. It's really a very dark pigmented purple here, so it gets a little intense. But I love to let these dry and then see like what, what it looks like when it's dry. Alright, folks. I feel like this was fun, and I'm just about ready to call this one done. Our hour's almost up, so I might just add a little bit of texture here and there with some spots on my leaves. And I like see how they like disperse as I put them on the page. It's really fun. And it's not really making it look like a spot, but it's kind of giving it that impression of a little texture. Alright, I'm going to let it dry. And I'm going to sign off. I'm going to flip the camera around and come back up. So that was our fun class today, just playing with contour drawing and color. And if you like what you saw, you can always donate. My Venmo is at Melinda-Van Kirk. And namaste. Thank you.